The kingdom of Altheria stretched across the golden savanna, where baobab trees stood like ancient guardians and the red earth glowed beneath the African sun. In the royal palace, Prince Rowan prepared for the most important decision of his life: choosing a bride. King Adebayo, Rowan's father, had declared that the prince must marry before the harvest season. The announcement sent ripples of excitement through every village, from the wealthy trading posts to the humblest farming settlements. Every eligible girl in Altheria dreamed of becoming the future queen. In the bustling market town of Zaria, preparations reached a fever pitch. Wealthy merchants' daughters spent fortunes on imported silks from the coast, gold jewelry that clinked with every movement, and perfumes that could be smelled from across the square. They hired the best dancers to teach them the traditional court dances, practiced their royal greetings until their knees ached, and memorized poetry to impress the prince. Among them was Nadia, the mayor's daughter, whose father owned half the market stalls. She wore a dress of crimson and gold, with coral beads woven into her elaborately braided hair. "The prince will surely notice me," she boasted to anyone who would listen. "My father has already promised him 10 cattle and 50 bags of grain as my dowry." Her friend Jasmine, daughter of the kingdom's wealthiest trader, laughed dismissively. "Cattle and grain? My father is offering the prince rare ivory and precious gems from across the desert. When Rowan sees my collection of jewels, he'll forget every other girl exists." In a small mud-brick house at the edge of Zaria lived Elise, a girl of 17 with gentle eyes and calloused hands. She had no parents to boast about, no wealth to display, no imported fabrics to wear. Her mother had died bringing her into the world, and her father, a skilled carpenter, had perished in a building collapse when she was only 12. Since then, Elise had survived on the kindness of strangers and her own quiet determination. Old Mama Ruth, a widow who sold vegetables in the market, had taken her in and taught her to sew. Elise spent her days mending clothes for villagers, earning just enough to buy bread and help Mama Ruth with expenses. When news of the prince's bride selection reached their humble home, Mama Ruth insisted that Elise should attend. "Every girl in the kingdom is invited," she said, her weathered hands clasping Elise's. "You have as much right as anyone to present yourself before the prince." Elise shook her head, looking down at her worn dress and bare feet. "Mama, look at me. I have nothing to wear, nothing to offer. Girls like Nadia and Jasmine have spent months preparing. What chance do I have?" But Mama Ruth was stubborn. She disappeared into her room and emerged with a bundle of fabric, simple cotton in soft cream and earth tones, saved from years of careful trading. "I've been keeping this for something special," she said. "You will make yourself a dress. You may not have gold and jewels, but you have something more valuable, a good heart and honest hands." For 3 weeks, Elise worked by candlelight after finishing her daily mending. She had no pattern books, only her memory of dresses she'd seen in the market and her natural eye for beauty in simplicity. She stitched African patterns along the hem, symbols of strength, wisdom, and kindness that her father had once taught her. The dress wouldn't shine like Jasmine's imported silk or flow like Nadia's expensive fabrics, but it was made with love, every stitch a prayer. The day of the selection arrived with great fanfare. Drums echoed across the kingdom as girls from every corner of Altheria made their way to the royal palace. The courtyard filled with a rainbow of colors: bright reds, deep purples, shimmering golds. The air was thick with competing perfumes and the nervous chatter of hundreds of hopeful girls. Elise arrived as the sun began its descent, casting long shadows across the palace grounds. She clutched her simple cloth bag, feeling desperately out of place among the peacock display of wealth around her. Several girls looked at her plain dress and giggled behind jeweled hands. "Who let the village beggar in?" someone whispered loud enough for Elise to hear. Nadia swept past in her crimson glory, deliberately bumping Elise's shoulder. "You're wasting your time, orphan girl. The prince wants a queen, not a servant." Elise's cheeks burned with shame, but she thought of Mama Ruth's encouraging words and held her head high. She hadn't come to win, she'd come because even orphans deserve to dream, if only for one day. Inside the great hall, Prince Rowan sat beside his father on an elevated platform. He was handsome, as the rumors claimed, with kind eyes that seemed tired of the spectacle before him. For hours, he had watched girl after girl parade past, each more elaborate than the last. They recited rehearsed compliments, performed practice dances, and displayed their family's wealth like goods at market. His father, King Adebayo, leaned toward him. "Any caught your eye yet, my son?" Rowan sighed. "They're all beautiful, father. But I see only their jewels and rehearsed smiles. I don't see their hearts." As the sun set and torches were lit around the courtyard, Elise finally reached the front of the line. She stepped forward in her simple dress, no jewelry to announce her arrival, no servants to proclaim her family name. The hall fell into an uncomfortable silence. Then, barely audible, someone laughed. But Prince Rowan's eyes locked onto Elise, and for the first time that day, he sat forward in his chair. There was something different about this girl, something real in a sea of pretense. "What is your name?" he asked, his voice cutting through the murmurs. "Elise, your highness," she replied, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I am an orphan from Zaria." "And what do you offer the kingdom, Elise of Zaria?" King Adebayo asked, not unkindly but with obvious curiosity. Elise looked directly at the prince, her honesty shining through. "I offer nothing but myself, your majesty. My hands that know hard work, my heart that understands suffering, and my hope that kindness can change the world, one person at a time." The hall erupted in mocking laughter from some of the other girls, but Prince Rowan didn't laugh. He stared at Elise as if seeing sunlight for the first time after a long darkness. As the evening concluded and the girls dispersed to their lodgings in the town, for the selection would continue for several more days, Rowan couldn't stop thinking about the orphan girl in the simple dress. While others had promised him wealth and beauty, she had promised him truth. That night, the prince made a decision that would change everything. Oh wow! Did the prince really notice the poor orphan girl over all those wealthy daughters? If this is giving you hope, smash that like button and subscribe to Folktales by Inaya. Drop a comment. Do you think Elise has a real chance? Or will the rich girls sabotage her? The next part reveals Prince Rowan's secret plan, and it's brilliant. Share this video. Turn on notifications. Prince Rowan couldn't sleep. While the palace rested under blankets of stars, he paced his chambers, Elise's words echoing in his mind. "My heart that understands suffering, and my hope that kindness can change the world." For years, he had dreaded this moment, the bride selection. He had watched his older brother, Prince Malik, marry for political alliance 5 years ago. The marriage had brought wealth to the kingdom but coldness to his brother's eyes. Rowan wanted something different. He wanted a partner who would rule not from privilege but from compassion. An idea formed in his mind, dangerous but necessary. Before dawn broke, Rowan summoned his most trusted friend and advisor, Jacob, the palace guard captain who had protected him since childhood. Jacob found the prince already dressed in the simple brown robes of a common merchant. "Your Highness, what are you planning?" Jacob asked, concern creasing his brow. "I need to see the truth, my friend," Rowan explained, removing his royal rings and placing them in Jacob's hands. "In the palace, these girls show me only what they think I want to see. But in the village, when they don't know I'm watching, I'll see who they truly are." Jacob frowned. "This could be dangerous. If someone recognizes you, then you'll be nearby to protect me," Rowan interrupted with a slight smile. "I've made my decision, Jacob. I need to know which of these girls has a heart worthy of leading our people." And so, as the sun painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, Prince Rowan slipped out of the palace disguised as a merchant's assistant. Jacob followed at a distance, dressed as a trader, keeping watch while remaining invisible. The town of Zaria was already awake. Market vendors arranged their goods, children fetched water from the well, and the visiting girls from the selection began emerging from their lodgings, continuing their elaborate preparations. Rowan positioned himself near the town square, pretending to arrange baskets of grain while observing the spectacle around him. Nadia swept through the market like a storm, her servants carrying her purchases. When a young boy accidentally bumped into her, spilling his mother's precious cooking oil, she didn't apologize. Instead, she berated him loudly. "Watch where you're going, you clumsy child. This dress cost more than your family earns in a year." The boy's mother rushed to apologize, but Nadia had already moved on, leaving them to clean up the mess alone. Rowan watched, his jaw tightening. Later that morning, he observed Jasmine haggling with an elderly cloth merchant. The old woman's hands shook as she explained that the fabric Jasmine wanted was her finest work, worth every copper coin she asked. Jasmine laughed cruelly. "You're trying to cheat me, old woman. I'll give you half the price or nothing at all." When the merchant reluctantly agreed, tears in her eyes, Jasmine tossed the coins carelessly on the ground, forcing the elderly woman to bend and gather them from the dust. Rowan's hands clenched into fists, but he remained still, observing. As midday approached, he wandered toward the poorer section of town, where mud-brick homes clustered together and children played in the dusty streets. Here, he noticed a small figure moving between houses, carrying a wooden bucket. It was Elise. She wore the same simple dress from the previous night, now covered by a worn apron. Rowan followed at a distance, curiosity burning in his chest. Elise stopped at a house where an elderly man sat outside, his leg wrapped in dirty bandages. She knelt beside him with gentle movements, carefully unwrapping the old cloth. "Uncle Moses, you must keep this cleaner," she said softly, pulling fresh bandages from her bag. "The wound won't heal if dirt gets inside." "I can't afford the healer, child," the old man protested weakly. "Then it's good I'm not a healer," Elise replied with a warm smile. "Just a girl with clean cloth and careful hands. Now hold still." Rowan watched, hidden in the shadow of a nearby house, as Elise cleaned and dressed the wound with practiced care. She left the old man with bread from her own bag before moving to the next house. At the second home, a young mother sat crying, two small children clinging to her skirts. "I can't feed them," she sobbed. "My husband went to the mines 3 months ago and never returned. The grain I had is gone." Elise sat beside her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "Mary, listen to me. Tomorrow morning, go to Mama Ruth's vegetable stand in the market. Tell her Elise sent you. She'll give you work sorting vegetables, and you can take home whatever doesn't sell. It's not much, but it's food for your babies." "But I have nothing to pay you for this kindness," Mary whispered. "Kindness isn't something you pay for," Elise answered, pressing a few copper coins into her hand. Probably her last ones, Rowan realized. "It's something you pass forward. One day, when you're strong again, you'll help someone else." Throughout the afternoon, Rowan followed Elise through the poorest quarters of Zaria. She visited the sick, bringing water and comfort. She played with orphan children, making them laugh with silly songs. She helped a blind woman navigate the crowded market, describing the colors and sounds around them with such vivid detail that even Rowan found himself seeing the world anew. Never once did she mention the prince or the selection. She didn't practice royal greetings or rehearse flattering speeches. She simply moved through the world, leaving it slightly better than she found it. As the sun began to set, Elise finally returned to Mama Ruth's small house, her shoulders sagging with exhaustion. Rowan, still in disguise, approached the vegetable stand where Mama Ruth was packing up her goods. "Excuse me, grandmother," he said respectfully. "I'm new to town and looking for work. I saw a young woman helping people all day. Elise, I think her name was. Does she work for a charity organization?" Mama Ruth looked up, studying him with sharp eyes that seemed to see more than they should. "Charity organization?" She laughed, a sound like rustling leaves. "No, young man. That's just Elise being Elise. Every night after she finishes her sewing work, she visits the sick and poor. Has done so since she was 14 years old, when she realized that suffering alone is terrible, but suffering alone while others could help is unbearable." "Doesn't she prepare for the selection?" Rowan asked. "I heard every girl in the kingdom is competing for the prince's attention." Mama Ruth's eyes twinkled with knowing amusement. Elise went to the palace because I insisted. But her heart isn't set on crowns and thrones, young merchant. Her heart is set on easing pain wherever she finds it. That's worth more than all the gold in the kingdom, though I doubt a prince would understand that. Rowan felt his throat tighten with emotion. Perhaps you underestimate princes, grandmother. As night fell over Zaria, Rowan returned to the palace, his mind made up. Jacob met him at the secret entrance, relief flooding his face. Well, Jacob asked, did you discover what you needed? Rowan removed the merchant's robes, his eyes bright with certainty. I discovered something extraordinary, my friend. While every other girl in this kingdom spent today perfecting their appearance and rehearsing their charms, one girl spent a day healing wounds, feeding the hungry, and bringing light into dark places. And she did it expecting nothing in return. The orphan girl? Elise? Jacob asked. Yes, Rowan confirmed. Among all the beautiful girls with their jewels and promises, Elise is the only one with a heart pure enough to heal a broken kingdom. She doesn't know it yet, but I've already chosen her. Jacob looked concerned. Your father won't approve, Your Highness. She has no dowry, no family connections, no political value. She has something more valuable than all of that, Rowan replied firmly. She has the one thing this kingdom desperately needs, genuine compassion. And I will convince my father of this, even if it takes every argument I have. That night, while the other girls slept dreaming of crowns, Elise knelt by her bedside and prayed not for victory in the selection, but for the strength to help one more person tomorrow. Neither she nor they knew that the prince had already seen everything he needed to see. The choice was made. Now came the difficult part, making everyone else understand why the orphan with nothing was worth more than all the wealthy daughters with everything. Wait, what? The prince has already chosen Elise, but she doesn't even know it. If this is making your heart sing, smash that like button and subscribe to Folktales by Inaya. Drop a comment. Will the king approve? Or will he force Rowan to choose a rich bride? The next part reveals the confrontation, and it's intense. Share this video with someone who believes in true love. Turn on notifications. King Adebayo sat in his private chambers, reviewing the day's selection reports when Prince Rowan requested an audience. The king sensed unusual determination in his son's posture as he entered. Father, I need to speak with you about the selection, Rowan began without preamble. The king set down his papers, studying his son's face. I've reviewed the candidates. Nadia, the mayor's daughter, comes with substantial political connections. Jasmine's trading family could open new routes across the desert. There's also Princess Clara from the Northern Territories. I choose Elise, Rowan interrupted, his voice steady but firm. Silence filled the chamber like floodwater. King Adebayo's expression shifted from confusion to disbelief to barely contained frustration. Elise, he finally said. The orphan girl? Rowan, she has nothing. No family, no wealth, no training for royal life. What are you thinking? I'm thinking about what kind of kingdom we want to build, Rowan replied, moving closer to his father. I disguised myself today and observed the candidates in the village. Father, you should have seen them. The wealthy girls who seemed so perfect in the palace treated common people like dirt beneath their feet. They were cruel, dismissive, and concerned only with their own status. The king waved his hand dismissively. Those are skills that can be taught. Royal comportment, diplomacy. But compassion cannot be taught. Rowan's voice rose with passion. Genuine kindness cannot be trained into someone who doesn't possess it. Father, while those girls prepared their appearances, Elise spent a day tending to wounded elders, feeding hungry children, and comforting the desperate. She did this expecting no reward, no recognition. That is the heart of a true queen. King Adebayo stood, his own frustration mounting. Rowan, I understand your romantic ideals, but ruling a kingdom requires more than a kind heart. It requires political alliances, economic stability, strategic partnerships. An orphan girl with no connections brings none of these things. She brings something more valuable, the trust and love of our people, Rowan countered. The wealthy already support us because it benefits them. But the common people, the farmers, the laborers, the struggling families, they need to see that we care about them, not just use them. Elise embodies that care. She is that connection. The king sank back into his chair, rubbing his temples. Even if I believed you, the royal council would never approve. They expect a bride who strengthens our position, not one who mends clothes for copper coins. Then we'll convince them, Rowan said, his determination unshaken. Give me 3 days, father. Let me prove that Elise has what this kingdom needs. King Adebayo looked at his son for a long moment, seeing the same stubborn conviction that he himself had possessed as a young man. Finally, he sighed. 3 days. But Rowan, if you cannot demonstrate to me and the council that this girl possesses the qualities necessary for a queen, you will choose from among the other candidates. Do we have an agreement? We do, Rowan agreed, relief and anxiety mixing in his chest. The next morning, the king announced an unprecedented addition to the selection process. All remaining candidates would face a series of tests over 3 days. Tests designed not of beauty or grace, but of character and wisdom. The announcement created an uproar among the wealthy families. This wasn't how royal selections worked. But the king's word was law, and the girls had no choice but to participate. The first test began at dawn in the palace gardens. King Adebayo addressed the assembled candidates with grave authority. You seek to become Queen of Altheria. A queen must understand all her people, not just the wealthy and powerful. Your first test is this. You will each spend the day in the village market, working alongside common merchants. At day's end, you will present what you learned about the lives of our people. Horrified gasps rippled through the wealthy girls. Work in the market. Like common vendors? Nadia's face flushed with anger. Your Majesty, surely you don't expect us to. I expect potential queens to understand every level of this kingdom, the king interrupted coolly. Those who refuse may withdraw from the selection now. No one withdrew, though Jasmine's expression suggested she wanted to. Pride and ambition kept them committed. The girls were divided among different merchants. Elise, accustomed to hard work, was paired with a potter who taught her to shape clay while discussing the challenges of selling goods when wealthy customers haggled unfairly. She listened intently, her hands quickly learning the craft, her mind absorbing every detail about the potter's struggles. Nadia was assigned to help a fabric merchant. She lasted barely 2 hours before complaining of the heat and dust, spending the rest of the day sitting in the shade while the merchant's daughter did the work. She learned nothing. Jasmine fared slightly better with a spice vendor, but she spent most of her time trying to convince wealthy shoppers to remember her name for when she became queen, rather than actually helping with sales or understanding the vendor's business challenges. Other girls performed with varying levels of effort, some genuinely trying to understand the work, others simply enduring until the test ended. At sunset, the candidates gathered before the king and Prince Rowan in the Great Hall. One by one, they presented their observations. Nadia spoke first, her report shallow and dismissive. The market workers are simple people with simple needs, Your Majesty. They would benefit from stronger laws against haggling and complaints. A firm hand would solve most of their problems. The king's expression remained neutral, but Rowan's jaw tightened. Jasmine's report focused primarily on the economic potential of the market. With proper investment from wealthy families like mine, market profits could increase significantly. The workers should be grateful for the employment we provide them. Several other girls gave similar responses, either dismissive of the merchant's struggles or focused solely on economic exploitation. Then it was Elisa's turn. She stood in her simple dress, now dusted with clay from the potter's wheel, and spoke with quiet conviction. Your Majesty, I learned that the market vendors are the heartbeat of our kingdom. They rise before dawn and work past sunset, yet many can barely feed their families. The potter I worked with creates beautiful vessels, but wealthy customers force her to lower prices until she makes almost nothing. Her daughter wants to learn the craft, but they can't afford to pass it down because there's no profit in it anymore. Elisa's voice grew stronger as she continued. I learned that when we allow the wealthy to exploit the poor without consequence, we don't just harm individuals. We kill the skills and traditions that make Altheria special. In 3 generations, there may be no more potters, no more skilled weavers, no more master craftsmen, because their children will be forced into other work just to survive. The hall had fallen completely silent. Even the other candidates listened, some with grudging respect, others with contempt. I learned, Elise concluded, meeting the king's eyes directly, that a kingdom is only as strong as its most vulnerable people. And right now, Your Majesty, many of our people are struggling while we celebrate in palaces. A true queen wouldn't just understand this, she would dedicate her life to changing it. King Adebayo stared at the orphan girl, his mind churning with unexpected thoughts. Beside him, Prince Rowan fought to keep the pride from his face. After a long moment, the king spoke. Tomorrow brings the second test. You are all dismissed. As the girls filed out, King Adebayo gestured for Rowan to remain. When they were alone, the king said quietly, I begin to understand your interest, my son. The girl speaks truth that makes powerful people uncomfortable, a dangerous but necessary quality. Then you'll support my choice? Rowan asked hopefully. I said I begin to understand. 2 tests remain, the king replied. But there was something different in his tone, not approval yet, but no longer outright dismissal. That night, word of Elisa's words spread through the palace like wildfire. The wealthy families were outraged. The servants were inspired. And in her small room, Elise prayed she hadn't just made everything worse by speaking so boldly to the king. She had no way of knowing that she had just passed the first test with flying colors, not just the king's test, but the more important one of staying true to herself even when wearing the truth could cost her everything. 2 more days remained. 2 more chances to prove that a heart of gold was worth more than a crown of jewels. Oh my goodness. Elise just called out the entire kingdom in front of the king. If this gave you chills, smash that like button and subscribe to Folktales by Inaya. Drop a comment. Was Elise brave or foolish? Will the king respect her honesty or punish her for it? The next part reveals the second test and someone tries to sabotage Elise. You won't believe what happens. Share this with someone who speaks truth to power. Turn on notifications. The second morning dawned grey and uncertain, clouds gathering over Altheria like witnesses to unfolding drama. In the servants' quarters, kitchen workers whispered about the previous day's test. The wealthy families were not pleased. In a luxurious guest chamber, Nadia paced furiously while Jasmine reclined on silk cushions, her face twisted with calculation. That orphan girl humiliated us, Nadia hissed. Did you see how the king looked at her? How Prince Rowan smiled. She's winning with her pathetic stories of poor people and suffering. Jasmine examined her jeweled nails with feigned disinterest, though her mind worked rapidly. The king may have been impressed, but there are still 2 tests remaining. Elise may speak well, but she lacks refinement, education, proper training. She'll fail eventually. And if she doesn't? Nadia demanded. What if that fool prince actually chooses her? We can't let an orphan become queen while we return to our families in shame. A dark silence fell between them. Then Jasmine sat up slowly, a cruel smile forming on her lips. What if Elise couldn't complete the next test? What if she was too ill to participate? Nadia's eyes widened with understanding and malicious glee. What are you suggesting? There's an herb seller in the lower market, Jasmine said quietly. My father uses his services occasionally for business dealings. He has things that can make someone very sick without killing them. Sick enough to miss a test, certainly. That's dangerous, Nadia whispered, though her tone suggested interest rather than hesitation. So is letting an orphan steal a crown that should belong to one of us, Jasmine countered. Are you with me or not? Before Nadia could answer, a knock sounded at the door. They quickly composed themselves as a palace servant entered, announcing the second test would begin within the hour. The second test gathered all candidates in the palace's healing ward, a large building where the kingdom's sick and injured received care. King Adebayo stood before them with the royal physician, Master Simon, a kind-faced older man with gentle hands. A queen must have the strength to face suffering without flinching, the king announced. Today, you will assist our physicians in caring for the sick. You will clean wounds, comfort the dying, and serve those whom society often forgets. Your compassion and courage will be observed. Several girls blanched at the prospect. Caring for the sick meant blood, infection, unpleasant smells, and close contact with disease. But again, none dared withdraw. The candidates were divided among different sections of the healing ward. Elise was assigned to the most challenging area, the quarantine section where patients with contagious illnesses recovered in isolation. Master Simon led her personally to this section, studying her with curious eyes. Most noble girls would faint at this assignment, he observed. You seem unafraid. Sickness doesn't care about nobility, Elise replied simply. And fear doesn't heal anyone. I'll do my best to help, Master Simon. The physician smiled warmly. I believe you will, child. Inside the quarantine ward, Elise found 15 patients in various states of illness. Fever, coughing, weakness. She moved among them with natural grace, washing fevered faces with cool water, changing soiled bedding, offering sips of medicinal tea. She spoke to each patient, learning their names and stories, treating them not as diseases to be managed but as people deserving dignity. In another section, Nadia lasted barely an hour before claiming she felt faint and needed rest. She spent the remainder of the test sitting in the corridor, far from any actual patients. Jasmine performed marginally better, following the physician's instructions with mechanical efficiency but no warmth. She touched patients only when absolutely necessary and never once looked them in the eye or spoke beyond clinical requirements. But Jasmine's mind wasn't on the test. Throughout the day, she watched Elise through the quarantine ward's windows, hatred burning in her chest. During a break when the candidates were served lunch, Jasmine slipped away from the group. The lower market was a 15-minute walk from the palace. Jasmine, disguised in a borrowed servant's cloak, found the herb seller's stall tucked in a shadowy corner. The seller was a thin, nervous man with darting eyes. I need something to make someone very ill, Jasmine whispered, pressing gold coins into his palm. Nothing permanent, just enough to keep her bedridden for 2 days. The herb seller hesitated, recognizing the girl beneath the disguise as one of the selection candidates. But the gold was substantial. From a hidden compartment, he withdrew a small vial of yellowish liquid. 3 drops in her drink tonight. She'll be too sick to stand by morning. 2 days of fever and pain, then recovery. But if anyone discovers... No one will discover anything, Jasmine interrupted, snatching the vial. This transaction never happened. She hurried back to the palace, her heart racing with both fear and exhilaration. That evening, when the test concluded and the candidates gathered for their evening meal, Jasmine waited for her opportunity. Elise sat at the far end of the dining hall, exhausted but content. She had spent the entire day caring for the sick, and Master Simon had praised her natural healing touch. Tomorrow was the final test, and then the king would make his announcement. As servants brought water pitchers to the tables, Jasmine positioned herself near Elise, the vial hidden in her palm. She waited until Elise was distracted in conversation with another girl, one of the few candidates who had treated her kindly, then moved swiftly. But what Jasmine didn't know was that someone had been watching her all day. Jacob, the palace guard captain, had been assigned by Prince Rowan to observe the candidates discreetly. He had noticed Jasmine's absence during the test, had seen her slip away to the lower market, and had followed at a distance. Though he hadn't heard the conversation with the herb seller, he had seen the exchange of coins and the vial. Now, as Jasmine's hand moved toward Elisa's cup, Jacob strode forward with deliberate speed. "Lady Jasmine," he called out loudly, his voice carrying across the dining hall. "The king requests your immediate presence." Jasmine froze, the vial still hidden in her palm but her hand suspended over Elisa's cup. Every eye in the hall turned toward her. Panic flashed across her face. I was just... She stammered. Now, Jacob commanded, his tone leaving no room for argument. Jasmine had no choice but to follow, the vial still clutched in her sweating hand. As they walked down the corridor, Jacob spoke in a low, dangerous voice. I know what you carry, Lady Jasmine. I know where you went this afternoon. You have two choices. Confess to the king now and face immediate banishment from the kingdom, or leave the palace tonight, withdraw from the selection, and never speak of this again. Jasmine's face drained of color. You can't prove anything, she whispered desperately. I followed you to the herb cellar, Jacob replied coldly. I have 3 palace guards who witnessed your absence during the test. And if you don't believe we can prove anything, feel free to test that theory before the king. He takes attempted poisoning very seriously, even when it targets an orphan. They had reached a small side door leading out of the palace. Jacob opened it, revealing the dark streets beyond. Choose now, he said. Confession and public shame, or quiet departure and preservation of your family's honor. Jasmine stared at the open door, then at the vial in her hand. With shaking fingers, she handed it to Jacob and stepped through the doorway into the night. She would send word tomorrow that she had fallen ill and withdrawn from the selection. Her father would be furious, but at least she would avoid prison. Jacob watched her disappear into the darkness, then carefully sealed the vial. He would show this to Prince Rowan in the morning as evidence of how far some would go to prevent Elisa's rise. Back in the dining hall, Elise noticed Jasmine's empty seat but thought little of it. She finished her simple meal, thanked the servants, and retired to her room to prepare for the final test. She had no idea how close she had come to disaster, nor that someone had been watching over her all along. Sometimes, she reflected as she knelt for her evening prayers, kindness created invisible shields, people who cared enough to protect you even when you didn't know you needed protection. Tomorrow would bring the final test. Tomorrow, the king would make his choice. Jasmine tried to poison Elise. And Jacob caught her red-handed. If this has you on the edge of your seat, smash that like button and subscribe to Folktales by Inaya. Drop a comment. Should Jacob have exposed Jasmine publicly? Or was quiet banishment the right choice? The final part brings the last test and the king's decision. Will Elise become queen? Share this with someone who loves justice. Turn on notifications. The final morning arrived with golden sunlight streaming through the palace windows, as if the heavens themselves blessed what was about to unfold. Only 10 candidates remained. Jasmine had sent word of her sudden withdrawal, and 3 others had quietly departed during the night, unable to face another test of character they knew they would fail. Prince Rowan met with Jacob before sunrise, learning of the poison plot. Rage and protectiveness warred in his chest. She could have killed Elise, he said, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. But she didn't, Jacob replied calmly. And Elise never needs to know how close she came to danger. Let her face today's test with clear eyes and an unburdened heart. Rowan nodded slowly, recognizing the wisdom in his friend's words. Thank you, Jacob, for protecting her when I couldn't. That's what friends do, Your Highness, Jacob said with a slight smile. Now go prepare for the final test. I have a feeling today will change Altheria forever. The remaining candidates gathered in the throne room, where King Adebayo sat with the full royal council, 12 elders who advised the crown on all major decisions. The atmosphere was heavy with anticipation. You have all demonstrated various qualities over these 3 days, the king began, his voice resonating through the hall. But today's test is the most important. A queen must possess not just compassion and understanding, but wisdom in the face of impossible choices. He gestured to the council members, who each held a sealed scroll. You will each receive a scenario, a problem currently facing our kingdom. You will have 2 hours to consider your response. Then you will present your solution to this council. We will judge not the perfection of your answers, but the wisdom of your hearts. The scrolls were distributed. Elise unrolled hers with trembling hands, reading the scenario written in formal script. A severe drought threatens the northern villages. Food stores are depleting rapidly. The wealthy landowners have grain reserves but refuse to sell at affordable prices, preferring to export to neighboring kingdoms for higher profit. The poor face starvation. As queen, how would you address this crisis? Elisa's breath caught. This wasn't just a hypothetical scenario. She recognized this as a real situation affecting Altheria's northern regions. She had heard merchants discussing it in the market, had seen the worry in Mama Ruth's eyes when speaking of cousins in the north. The 2 hours passed like minutes as Elise wrestled with the problem. Simple solutions came easily to mind: force the landowners to sell, seize their grain stores. But these would create other problems, breeding resentment and discouraging future production. Yet doing nothing meant people would starve. When the time came to present, Nadia went first. Her solution was harsh and simple: seize the grain by royal decree. The landowners will complain, but they'll obey. The crown's authority must be absolute. The council members exchanged glances but said nothing. Other candidates presented variations of similar solutions, some suggesting heavy taxation on exports, others proposing forced sales, one even suggesting imprisoning landowners who refused to cooperate. Then it was Elisa's turn. She stood before the king and council, her simple dress contrasting sharply with the ornate chamber, and spoke with quiet conviction. Your Majesty, members of the council, this problem has no easy answer. But I believe the solution must consider not just the immediate crisis but the future of our kingdom. She took a breath, organizing her thoughts. If we seize grain by force, we solve today's hunger but create tomorrow's famine. Landowners will produce less next season, fearing confiscation. If we do nothing, people starve and lose faith in the crown's protection. So what would you do? King Adebayo asked, leaning forward with genuine interest. I would propose a 3-part solution, Elise replied. First, I would personally visit the northern villages and the landowners, not as a queen issuing commands but as a mediator seeking understanding. The landowners must see the faces of those who hunger, not as statistics but as real people, neighbors, fellow citizens of Altheria. She continued with growing confidence. Second, I would offer the landowners a partnership rather than punishment. The crown would guarantee purchase of a portion of their next harvest at fair prices, ensuring they have incentive to produce more rather than less. This addresses their fear of loss while securing future food supplies. And third, the king prompted. Third, and most importantly, I would establish community grain reserves in every region, managed jointly by landowners and villagers. In good years, a portion of harvest would be stored against bad years. This prevents both hoarding and future crises. Everyone contributes, everyone benefits, and no one faces starvation alone. The council chamber fell silent. Slowly, the eldest council member, Chairman David, rose to his feet. That is the wisdom not of a ruler who commands from above, but of a leader who stands among her people. That is the wisdom this kingdom has needed for generations. One by one, the other council members nodded their agreement. Even those who had opposed choosing an orphan could not deny the insight in her words. King Adebayo looked at his son, seeing the pride and love shining in Rowan's eyes. Then he looked at Elise, this girl with calloused hands and a golden heart, this orphan who had somehow understood what nobility had forgotten, that true leadership serves rather than rules. Elise of Zaria, the king said, his voice carrying the weight of royal authority. In 3 days, you have demonstrated compassion, courage, and wisdom beyond your years. You have shown my council and me that true nobility has nothing to do with birth and everything to do with character. Elisa's heart pounded so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. Therefore, King Adebayo continued, it is my decision, supported by this council, that you be named as Prince Rowan's chosen bride. If you accept, you will become Princess of Altheria, and in time, its queen. The chamber erupted in gasps, some of shock, some of joy, some of disbelief. The remaining wealthy candidates stared in stunned silence as their world tilted on its axis. Elise felt tears streaming down her face. She looked at Prince Rowan, who had risen from his seat and now approached her with a smile that lit up the entire hall. "I have watched you for days," Rowan said softly, taking her hands in his. "I have seen your kindness to strangers, your wisdom in the face of injustice, and your courage to speak truth even when it might cost you everything. Elise, you are everything a queen should be. Will you stand beside me and help heal this kingdom together?" Through her tears, Elise managed to speak. "Yes, Your Highness. But I'm frightened. I know nothing of being a princess, nothing of royal protocols or politics. I'm just an orphan who sews clothes and helps sick people." "You're not just anything," Rowan replied, his voice strong and certain. "You're exactly what Altheria needs. And I promise, you won't face this alone. We'll learn together, lead together, and build a kingdom where compassion matters more than crowns." King Adebayo approached, placing a hand on Elisa's shoulder. "My son has chosen wisely. You have my blessing and my commitment to teach you everything you need to know. But Elise," and here his voice grew both gentle and serious, "the most important lessons, the ones about caring for people and seeing beyond status to recognize true worth, those you will teach us." The news spread through the kingdom like wildfire. In the wealthy quarters, some families raged at the insult of an orphan being chosen over their daughters. But in the markets, in the villages, in the humble homes where common people lived and worked, celebrations erupted. Mama Ruth wept tears of joy when Elise returned to tell her the news. "I always knew you were special, child," she said, embracing Elise tightly. "Not because you might become a queen, but because you never let hardship harden your heart. That's the rarest treasure in this world." In the months that followed, Elise underwent intense training in royal protocols, governance, and diplomacy. But true to his word, Prince Rowan ensured she never lost touch with the people she came from. Every week, even as princess in training, she visited the markets, the healing wards, the poor villages, not as royalty bestowing charity, but as one who understood because she had lived it. The wedding, when it came, was unlike any Altheria had ever seen. Instead of her exclusive palace ceremony, it was held in the great square where common people and nobility gathered together. Mama Ruth sat in a place of honor beside the king himself. And when Elise walked down the aisle in a dress she had sewn with her own hands, beautifully simple but adorned with patterns representing every village in Altheria, the people didn't see an orphan pretending to be a princess. They saw one of their own, elevated not despite her humble origins but because of the golden heart those origins had forged. Years later, when historians wrote about Queen Elisa's reign, they noted that it marked a turning point for Altheria. Under her influence, the kingdom established systems of support for the vulnerable, created opportunities for common people to advise the crown, and built a society where compassion tempered power. But those who knew her best understood that the secret of her success was simpler than any policy or program. Queen Elise ruled the same way she had lived as an orphan, with genuine kindness, practical wisdom, and an unwavering belief that every person, regardless of birth or status, deserved dignity, opportunity, and hope. And beside her always stood King Rowan, grateful every day that he had looked past jewels and fine dresses to see the greatest treasure his kingdom had ever known, an orphan girl with a heart of gold who taught them all that true nobility is measured not by what you have, but by what you give. The kingdom of Altheria flourished, not because it was the wealthiest or most powerful, but because it had learned the most important lesson of all, that a nation's strength lies not in its palaces but in its people, and a leader's worth is measured not by their crown but by the hearts they heal and the lives they lift. And they all lived in a kingdom where compassion was currency, kindness was strength, and an orphan with nothing proved to be worth more than all the riches of the world. Elise became queen. An orphan with nothing became the most powerful woman in the kingdom. If this story touched your heart, smash that like button and subscribe to Folktales by Inaya. Drop a comment. What's the most important lesson from this story? Share this with everyone who needs to remember that true worth comes from character, not circumstances. Thank you for watching. More powerful folktales coming soon. Turn on notifications so you never miss a story.